to establish the move. They use that expression, establish the move. Now, if a fellow has a certain move he's going to do, like this pickup, if he's going to pick the cards up, you know, with a sweep like this, he's going to pick them up that. Now, in other words, if I just come up and pick the cards up suddenly like that and deal, well, it looks suspicious. But every time I pick up the cards, I do this, and I establish that way of picking them up. You get accustomed to that. Now when I do the phony move, but if I suddenly pick up cards like this, and then suddenly do this, so you've got to establish the move. You're tossing the broads, as they call it. Tossing, this means tossing the cards. You see, when you throw the 3 cards down, we have what they call shills or boosters, Confederates working in the audience. Well, they themselves can't follow the card when it's thrown by a clever operator, so the operator has to tip them off or show them where the card is. So during his spiel, so-called, when he's making the remarks about tossing the cards, he always said, 10 gets you 20, 20 gets you 40, or some such thing. But now, supposing the card's over on the right-hand side, the expression for that is over on 40. But if I say, all right, 10 gets you 20, 20 gets you 40, over on 40, that over on. As soon as you hear over on 40, that means the card is here. If you say over on 10, that's over on the left side. And if you say make no over at all, I think it comes from office. I mean, really, it's like giving the office, you might say. But anyway, that's they have ways of warning you, of telling the Confederate where the card is. Otherwise, he'd be at a loss to know where it was himself, and he couldn't make the proper bet.
Probably, from what the little I've read, as much money has changed hands in America's history with 3-card money, I guess.
Oh yes, the shell game, well, that's why they're so notorious. The shell game and 3-card money, even in the New York subways, when I left New York, there were still, sometimes late in the morning, 3 or 4 in the morning in the New York subways, you'd see 3 or 4 fellows gathered around with a little crowd, fleecing some poor fellow out of money. And it's incredible that after all the exposure and the warnings not to play another man's game, that there was always somebody that's... Yeah. And it's that Cuban wanting to get something for nothing. Yeah. If they'd be honest and not strive to get something for nothing, they wouldn't be in any danger of being
wrong. Well, of course, 3-card money also has the advantage of being so incredibly visual.
Yes,
it's really a visual trick.
They do. Especially when they call it putting the corner on, the bent corner.
Yeah,
they call it putting the lug on.
Would you toss a...
yeah, they call it putting the lug on.
We could see maybe
they call it putting the lug on.
Putting the lug on?
Yeah, the lug is the corner, that's what they call it.
Oh, yes, right.
A bent corner. Well, I'll just illustrate that. I'll just illustrate that. I did this on the Paris television. They call this bonneteau in Paris. That's the name for 3-card money. Now, they always bend the cards this way so that they're easy, give you a facility in picking the cards up from the table. And they always say, a little game from Hanky Poo, black for me, the red for you, $10 gets you 20, 20 gets you 40. You think I was a professional the way I spit it out. I've done this since I was a kid, fooling the boys at school. Now, here's the idea. You tell them to watch the queen. Now, I can throw them down like that, and of course the queen can go over there, or I can throw them the same way and cross my hands, the queen goes in the center. But if I throw the cards like this, you see, and show you the queen, and then show you that this is black and this is black, you naturally think this is the queen, but that's black also. You see, that's always black, and this is always black, and this is always black, and the queen is there. Now, that's very ambiguous. I mean, most people can't follow that. But the average person is afraid to bet on another man's game. So what happens, they have a Confederate in the audience, and this fellow bets on the wrong card. He throws the card aside. When I stoop to pick it up, the Confederate bends the corner of the card up like that, and he covers it over. He covers the card over. Now, I come back and I say, listen, mister, don't throw my cards around like that. They get all dirty and spotted, and anybody can pick the card out. I pretend not to notice this bent corner at all. Now, so I throw the cards like this. I throw the queen, I throw them. It looks as if it went over there, but the shill puts his hand over. He says, I'll bet you 100 on this, 100 on this, or what, $50, whatever it is. And of course he wins. And now these timid individuals standing around see this bent corner, so they think, well, this is an easy game. So here's the way he works. He says, now remember, gentlemen, that's black. He says, this is black. And he says, this is the queen. He pretends not to notice the corner. He throws it over like that, throws it over like that. Now he crosses his hands this way. And of course, the shill again covers this. He says, 100 on this, 100. And all the suckers come in. And they're very sorry because that's black, and this is black, and the queen is over there, see? So there's no chance to beat this man. I mean, you got to...
That's beautiful.
It's trying to get something for nothing, you lose your shirt. So don't try to get something for nothing. The one thing that I loved was New York, because I used to read a great deal when I was young, and it seemed that all the novelists, the painters, the sculptors, the artists, the actors, they all sooner or later something in New York. At Sherry's or one of the great, they'd meet, somewhere in New York. And New York had a fascination for me. Not so much for the city alone, but for the people that I used to read and visit and congregated there. And they do say that if you stand on the corner of 42nd and 5th Avenue, that long enough you'll meet every celebrity in the world. Here I am, a young fellow from Canada, came down to the biggest city in the world, and I got recognition from the greats, in New York. And I always had loved Lace. I never copied anything consciously, but when he called himself the international card expert, I thought, well, I can be the New York card expert.
Yeah, what's a nice word, too.
Better than magician.
Yeah, but it's a nice word.
But anyway, the nice part of the international, the New York card expert, people who used to sometimes meet people that think I was a bridge expert, or I could talk on bridge. I could use it. I could say, well, if I didn't want to say I did magic, I could say, well, I'm an expert on card, on bridge, and I stay any game you want name, or something like that. It could cover different.
Yeah, I know in reading back on some of the old Jinx publications that I would occasionally come across an article where your name was mentioned in those days. I guess this would be
well, it's funny.
the 30s.
As a rule, I avoided getting my name mentioned, but it's
well, I mean, just in the trivia kind of, what's happening kind of in magic. And I know occasionally I run across where Dai Vernon is now at the such and such room of the hotel so and so, And this was probably in the 30s, I guess, back in the 30s. And was that was there a lot of that going on? In other words, were there a lot of house magicians?
No. I think that, you see, Billy Rose really started. There wasn't a single magician working in any, except in theaters in vaudeville, But when Billy Rose opened his Casino de Paris, he put in, a fortune teller, a sketch artist, and a magician to work intimately, and that's what started. I started with Billy Rose. And then I went to the Madison, and then after that they started putting magicians. But I was really a pioneer in that field.
I see.
New York. Although Chicago had before, Chicago had some before that.
Yeah, no, that was really working the restaurants and the dinner crowd, the close-up magic. And people like Bert Allard.
They had it in Europe, Bert Allard later worked in Chicago.
Chicago and
that was later.
Chicago's always been a mecca for
that's
magic.
Right, Chicago has. Chicago at one time had 18 different restaurants and bistros and speakeasies where magicians worked. 18 different places. New York never had more than 5 at the most. Talking about Johnny Scarney, when here I am in the New York hospital with a cast completely right down both, just my fingers. The cast went right down to my fingers, and big, heavy plaster cast, and everybody that come in, they used to autograph with a pencil or a pen on this plaster cast. And these arms are really quite decorative with all these autographs. I had as many once Saturday. I had 60 magicians come in to see me.
That's great. And
they all autographed the damn arm. Well, these things were something, I'll never forget when Johnny Scarney walked in the auction. What a mess. Well, he said, just want to show you. He said, fellows like you and me shouldn't go to work. And then not much to say. Just goes to show you, you're punished for going to work.
It's a personal
guys like you and me. He always declared when Johnny, I intended to
tell you. He really identified with
I intended to tell you this at Moose on Frank.
Yeah.
Every time I'm with Johnny and he's sitting with a bunch of, right, only a short time ago. He said, right in the castle here, not so many weeks ago, up at the upstairs bar there. He said, a whole lot of magicians all standing around talking. He said, well, he said, Dai and I are 50 years ahead of all you jerks. He said that in front of all of me. Dai and I are ahead. I said, Johnny, please don't always declare me in. I said, you are, not me. Yeah, now, what are you talking about? You're my pal, ain't you? We're 50 years ahead of everybody. But he always tells everybody. And when he's alone, he doesn't. But when he's with me, I said, Johnny, please, let me talk about it. Don't tell him. There's one interesting thing that in Erdnase, you see, Erdnase has a very good description of streetcar money, incidentally, but there's one interesting thing in Erdnase. Erdnase talks about, the backhand palm. He talks about this palm. He said this has very little use except as an exhibition of dexterity to show how clever you are. But he says, however, on one occasion, it got us out of a very serious situation. However, this is another story. And this worried me as a kid, about 12 years old. How could this get you out of a difficult situation? And I thought about it, thought about it, thought about it. And then years later, when I came down to New York, there's a statute in the law in New York that if you're caught throwing three-card money in a public place, it's a $100 fine and I forget, a month in jail or something. If you're caught gambling for money in any public place in New York with three-card, it's written right in the... So I thought, is it possible that they had this law and Erdnase was caught with three cards and the judge said, well, what are you doing with those three cards? You might have said, well, Judge, look, I'll show you what I do. I thought that's one possibility. And I thought another possibility is that he had a card palm in his hand and some guy stuck a gun in. He said, up in your hand. I met a fellow named Perkins from Lexington, Kentucky, and he was one of the greatest guys palming cards for a gambler. He could use his hands perfectly normally with a card palm. Tie his tie, drink, eat, write, do anything. And I wanted to learn some things from him, and he wouldn't. He was a gambler. He wouldn't talk. He said, what do you want to do tricks for? I said, well, for fun. He said, what fun do you get out of it? You make any money out of it? I said, well, you get money for entertaining somebody. Well, why don't you learn to play cards for a living? You make a fortune. What do you want to monkey around with that stuff? I said, that's the kind of guy, what do you know? I care about tricks. What do you want to fool people? Told Charlie, too. What do you want to do that stuff for? What do you mean? What the hell, I make a couple of $1,000 when I do my tricks. What are you doing with that? What are you talking about? I can play cards for 10 minutes and make more than you were making a month. You know, that's the way you talk. You talk. But anyway, I wanted him to show me. He wouldn't tip, you know. He wouldn't say anything. So he said, I tell you, he said, if you can show me how to, because gamblers always palm this palm. See, they never palm, very seldom. They always palm with this.
Yeah.
You know,
they always have the crimp.
Yeah, so the hand is always in a natural position.
Yeah, I see.
Well, anyway, now he said, he said, when a card is over on this side, he said, the deck is over here. He said, I can say, all right, your deal, and get rid of this card. But he said, if the deck's over here, he said, I can't come over here with my hand and get rid of the card. He said, if you could show me a way how to get the card from this hand into this hand unobserved, he said, I'll show you anything you want to know. This guy said. So I went back. I was living right here in California. This is about 20 years ago. I was living in Charlie Miller, the El Vigo Apartments where Charlie Miller lived. I had the top floor there. Well, anyway, I was living there, and I was waiting for Charlie to come in. I was sitting there thinking, how the hell can you get a card from this hand into the other? Bring your hand this way, bring it this way. How can you naturally bring your hands together? I thought you can bring them together this way, you can bring them together this way. But how could you transfer that card? And I really was trying, no, you can't do that. You could rub your hands together, what can you do? So, anyway, this is absolutely true. I suddenly looked at the time, because it was getting late, and I put my hand like that. And I thought, that's a position I never thought of, see? So, see, this move is almost perfect. So I came up with this move. See, for instance, I could say, well, we've only got about 3 minutes more to play, see? But it's a natural move. Look, I say, well, we've only got about 3 minutes more to play, and I can get it. But this move, see, even from the side, see, it can't be seen, see? But anyway, he loved that move. He said, I can use this. He said, he shook hands with me. And he said, where'd you get that? I said, I thought of it last night. Great. Now what do you want to learn? He showed me some things.
That's beautiful.
But as I say, this is absolutely occurred just like I'm telling you. By accident. This is a very interesting thing. That ideas, just like this occurred to me. I don't know whether this has happened with you. An idea suddenly hits you just like this. An idea hits you like that. Well, you can work and nothing happens, but suddenly just hits you like that. But, as I say, I know these ideas don't hit you unless you've done a lot of groundwork. Nothing, it's like you go plateau, everybody knows that, of learning. But sometimes an idea hits you, but it will not hit you if you haven't done that pioneer work.
You have to do the homework.
You have to do the homework. Many years ago, when I was in Asheville, North Carolina, a man named John C. Sprong, who was long passed away, much older than I was, he wrote to me in Asheville and said, there's a rumor that out west somewhere there's a man who can deal from the middle of the pack. And nobody'd ever heard of such a thing, dealing from the middle. Now it's a trite phrase among magicians, but that time nobody'd ever heard of dealing from the middle of the pack. He wrote to me and said to me, Vernon, he said, if you're traveling around the country cutting these silhouettes, he said, if you ever get out west and you can trace down this gambler, he said, I'm willing to pay $100 for any information at all about the man. He said, I don't expect, just give me any information about him, I'd be willing to send $100. I wrote to Sprong. I said, Sprong, I'd be just as anxious to meet him as you would. You don't have to send me any $100. But anyway, to cut a long story short, I was in St. Joseph, Missouri. No, I'm sorry. This was in Kansas City, because I was with Fawcett Ross, who lives in St. Joseph, Missouri. I was in Kansas City, and we were sitting one day talking, and the jailer from the local hotel called up Fawcett, and he said, Fawcett, he says, you're interested in this sleight of hand. He says, we've got a fellow in jail here, a Mexican, and he said, he's very wonderful with the cards. Would you like to come over and see him? So this was on a Sunday. So he said, when they're having chapel, I'll have him come into my office and he'll show you a few things with cards. He's been astounding all the inmates of the prison here. He said, we have him on a stabbing charge. He won money gambling, and he said the fellas chased him out to take the money away from him in the alley, and he stabbed a man, and he's up on a murder charge, and if this man dies, he'll be a murder charge, but if the man gets better, it'll just be a case of assault. So anyway, we went over, to cut a long story short, we went over to the jail to see this fellow, and he wasn't so good, but he was good enough to astound the sheriff, you know. But in talking to him, I asked him, I said, have you ever heard of anybody be able to deal the cards from the middle of the deck? And this Mexican says, well, yes. He says, I see in Kansas City, I see this man do this. And this was the first information or clue I had. So all I knew, it was around Kansas City. So I went to Kansas City with Charlie Miller. I took Charlie Miller, who was visiting at the time, and I asked all over in pool rooms and gambling dens and everywhere if they knew anything about a man who deal from the center of the deck, a mechanic. And all these wise guys, they looked at me and said, it's hard enough to get the second card. What are you talking about, deal from the center? What mail order catalog you've been reading? And they made ridicule of the idea. Well, anyway, I persisted, and finally I found out from old man Lee, who worked for the Kansas City Card Company, that he thought that there might be a man in Pleasant Hill, a little town outside of Kansas City. Well, anyway, I went to Pleasant Hill. I drove over, it's about 70 miles from Kansas City, and I inquired all over town. I thought if there was a notorious gambler around, he must be known. I even went into the bank and asked tellers, and I went to gasoline stations. Couldn't find out anything, and Charlie Miller got disgusted and came back. But I stuck it out. Well, finally, I went back, hopeless. I thought there's no chance, but I'm going to try it again. So a couple of weeks later, I drove all the way back again and drove over to Pleasant Hill. And the funny thing, I was sitting in my car, and I was thinking, well, I'm going to give up this quest because I'll never find this man. And I suddenly saw a little girl, a little grubby little girl, about 6 years old, munching on an ice cream cone. And she just come to the end of the cone, and she looked very sad that the ice cream was all gone. She was sucking it out of the bottom of the cone. So I said, little girl, come here. And she was very shy. She wouldn't come over. And I thought, well, her parents have told her not to talk to strange men or something. I said, no, come here. And she wouldn't come over. So I took a dime out of my pocket, and I threw it over to her. I said, buy another cone. I threw the cone, and oh, she was so grateful. She took the dime, and she went right out in the store and bought a cone. And she started munching on it again, standing there looking at me. And I said, little girl, do you know... oh, I knew that. By this time I'd learned the man's name, Kennedy, Bill Kennedy. He must be dead now, so I don't mention his name. I said, do you know where a man named Bill Kennedy lives? He said, he lives up on that white house on top of the hill. And I remember thinking at the time, a little child shall guide them. No, but it's true, this little girl. And I thought, this is impossible. But sure enough, I drove up to the top of the hill and knocked on the door, and this rather grubby-looking guy came to the door, and I said, are you Mr. Kennedy? He said, yes, Bill Kennedy. And the first remark I made to him, I said, I heard about you on the Atlantic. And he looked, he says, what? I said, I heard about you on the Atlantic. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, I play cards on the ships. I lied, perjury. And I said, I play cards, and I said, I heard about you on the ship. He says, you did? He says, come in, come in. And he called to his wife, he says, Madge, I've forgotten her name. He said, get the table ready. He said, get a stack of cards on the table. Well, he called me in, and I could see he was just like a little boy. He said, how could I get on a ship to play cards? He said, could a rough fellow like me get on in fast company like that? He said, I could win thousands of dollars if I could get on the ship. And I told him, you could pose as an Oklahoma oil man or something. I said, no problem at all. I said, well, anyway, I played a part, and I got the information out. That's the story of how I met this Bill Kennedy. It's a long story.
And he really, but I mean, he was,
oh, yeah,
he really could do it.
Yeah, he was excellent. I'll tell you, one of the big thrills, I've only had several thrills with magic in my life. When the first thing he showed me this, he took the cards, and he said, sit down. And I sat opposite this table. He took a pack of cards, and he took 3 kings out, and he put them on the bottom of the pack. And he said, now cut the pack. And I cut the pack of cards. And he said, how many hands will I deal out? I said, I don't care. He said, well, how many? I said, 6. So he dealt out 6 hands, stud poker, and he turned up the cards. And when he dealt my card that fell face up was a king. And I thought, my God, he must have dealt that from the center of the deck, because I cut the card right to the center. So then I said, go ahead. And he dealt another one that came face up. And I said, my God, it looked perfectly normal to me, you know. And I said, go ahead. I thought you got the other one in the hole. In other words, he'd already definitely won in the hole. That was the biggest thrill that I didn't realize that he'd even... Well, anyway, so my hand immediately went to my pocket. I had about $60 in my pocket, and I was trying to separate a $20 bill or a $10 bill. I thought, I'll give him $50 if he'll give me any information on this. I was looking down like this, and I thought, perhaps I've got something will interest him. So then I went into a few things that I do, and he became fascinated, and he traded me, you know. That's how I met him. But it's a true story.
Did you?
No, I was talking about the cut. Now, I mean, you know, this might be interesting. I mean, you know, see this book, Erdnase, you were talking about. Now, of course, there's been more thought on circumventing the cut. When cards are cut, naturally, they're cut. But the gambler has to bring them back. Now, there are many ways of cutting cards with one hand. Now, of course, this movement is wide open. You can see that. But gamblers reach across for their cigar or something. Under cover of reaching for their cigar, they cut the card. Now, they can be cut that way. They can be cut this 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 way. I've got 30 different ways of cutting a pack of cards. 30 different variations.
Open and closed.
Open and closed, yeah. You see an illustration. When cards are cut, I'll put the card face up on top of the pack. Now see, when cards are cut, naturally they're cut like this, and these go on top of these. But the way some gamblers do, of course this doesn't look right because the cards are face up. But when the cards are cut like this, you see, they're cut. Now these should go on top of those, but they pick them up with a sliding motion. I'll do that again. Pick them up with a sliding motion. See, instead of going on top, they go underneath. Now, that's a quick move, but sometimes gamblers want to see it done slowly, so they pick the cards up like that. Now, that card is really in the center, but by a maneuver like that, they bring it back to the top. So there are many different ways of doing these things. I mean, which is too technical to go into.
Finding a card blindly in a deck. Have you known a man or two who could do it?
Oh yes, this man Stevens I was talking about before. He did phenomenal things. In 3 or 4 shuffles, he could get 3 or 4 cards together at the top of the pack that he needed to make up a good hand, and he did it with absolute thing of beauty. I mean, as far as skill is concerned, like a masterful pianist or surgeon doing it.
So he would quickly pick out one, two, whatever.
So call the cards. They call it culling.
And he would call a number of cards with, 2 shuffles, 3 shuffles?
Yes. And of course, as I say, it's possible, you know, by judging. For instance, a skilled man with cards can cut off exactly 19 cards, or he can cut off exactly 11, or by sense of touch. It's hard to believe.
I practiced with 17.
It's like playing a harmonic on the violin. It has to be a very sensitive touch. In other words, I remember an old manual training teacher at school when I was a kid told us that a man with a needle point could work almost as fine as the finest micrometer by the natural sense of judgment with his eye, which is true to a certain extent. Because there are girls who count paper at 200 sheets at a time. They can infallibly, from a big stack of paper, just riffle and pick off exactly 200 sheets. In fact, I've seen them do it many times. They never miss. But this is a facility which can be, it's remarkable how these things can be trained. Now, of course, it's very difficult to cut off 20 and then cut off 25 and 26, but you can train yourself to cut off a certain amount, and you feel in your hand the sense of feel, the touch, and the sight combined to make a perfect estimation. The way they used to do in the old days, the man would go into a drugstore in a neighborhood. If he's going to play cards in a certain neighborhood, he'd go in and he'd buy a carton of cards, because they usually come a dozen packs in a carton. And he'd buy a dozen packs of cards. He'd say, we're going on a fishing trip, and we're going to play a lot of poker. I'd like a dozen packs of cards. Well, he buys the pack, and that night he goes home with his accomplice, and they sit up all night marking all the cards and resealing them, which they resealed them again with the wax and everything very carefully done. And then the next day he goes back and he says to the clerk in the store, he says, one of my friends died who was going on this fishing trip and we postponed the trip. And he says, I can't really use these cards. He said, I know, I don't suppose you'll take them back, but we'll give them for half price. You can resell them. Well, in fact, they'll give them back to the man. But now these cards are in there marked, and now when they play cards, they say, well, there's a drugstore in the corner, get a pack of cards. Well, naturally, they've got this carton of cards and sell them back. Well, that's the kind of thing they do, so that the man will swear they couldn't have been prepared because he bought them at the corner drugstore. But this happened not only with one carton. In fact, I've seen this happen in the last couple of years in Vegas. I was up in Vegas, and I saw a fella doing this very thing in a drugstore in Vegas. He went in and he had 3 cartons, and he said, we were going on a trip, but he said, one of my friends died, and he said, I can't use these cards. And the fella gave him a third of the price for 3 cartons of cards. Well, I knew darn well. I was there when the conversation ensued.
Of course, he has to hope that he's going to come across those someplace.
Yeah, oh, sure. Yeah, he recognized them. Well, we got a little secret mark on the case, so he knows they're his cards. So, I mean, he's perfectly innocent as far as...
tricks haven't changed too much.
No, that's like... I guess Watergate know a lot of these things.
Yeah, right.
That's the way they are. There are all kinds of schemes.
That's fantastic.
So you can't, when a man vouches, he says, I'm sure it was on the level, because I bought the card myself. Well, it's true, he did, and he's speaking the truth, but he doesn't know what went on before that. So that's the funny thing.
Is it true that really all of the professional mechanics shy away from any kind of involvement with magicians or magic?
Well, this is one of the greatest fallacies in connection with gambling and magicians. There's people, of course, a fellow told me years ago, if you sell wallets, we say you sell pocketbooks or wallets, purses to the public, and if you have them and perhaps the sales girl looks at, would you like to have one of these wallets? A person always says, I'd like one, but I got no money to put in it. Now, they think this is original. This has been said 5 million times. I'd buy one if I had the money to put in it. They think they're saying something original, where it's been said over and over again. Now, the same thing when anybody does any card tricks, even if they spread the cards out like this and turn them over like this, the fellow says, boy, I'd hate to play poker with you. This is so trite. I mean, they think they're saying something smart and something original, but they say, boy, I'd hate to play poker with you. Now, as a matter of fact, a real gambler would rather play poker with a pretty good magician than anybody else, because he's more liable to be gullible and taken, because little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And it's as different as classical music and ragtime, the two arts, because it's brought to a state of refinement. The gambler, he has to do things under the closest scrutiny. He can't make sudden movements, or can't do gyrations of different kinds. It's all got to drop into the conformity or the uniformity of card playing, or what takes place in a gentleman's game. I mean, it has to be done very well. Whereas a magician can make loud noises, he can tip over a chair, he can stumble, he can do anything, and it fits in, he can cover it, magic. But you can't do this in gambling. I mean, it's got to be very subtle. So, as I say, the magician doesn't realize. See, gamblers have a beautiful word for misdirection. They don't call it misdirection. They call it shade.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about some of that.
Now, you can do the most beautiful move. I don't care what it is. A beautiful pass or maneuver of some kind. Now, you show it to a magician, he'll say, boy, that's great. Gee, that's great. Can you show me that? Can you teach me that? Now, a gambler will look at it, and if he can see the movement or sees it's a little bit off, he changes the moment. At least he doesn't change the moment, but he'll say, what shade do you use with it? What shade do you use with it? This is important. How do you cover this movement? How do you make it pass muster? He says, what shade do you use with it? Now, this is it's a very picturesque word, shade, because that's exactly what it is. It's done under shadow.
In other words, the move is good, but how do you use it?
Yeah. How do you use it? How do you apply it? Yeah. What shade do you use with it? Well, that's so. As I say, the gambler would rather gamble with a magician than anybody else, because he knows the magician only knows up to a certain point, certain things about the art of deception.
Have you known a few men who were...
Alexander Herman was one of the... He lost a fortune gambling. Alexander Herman.
Really?
The image of the American magician with the beard, the goatee, the man in the picture there, what's his name, Drew there, he lost a fortune gambling. and several magicians. Gally, one contemporary.
With the chicks.
Yeah, lost a fortune gambling.
Really?
He has to work in Vegas 6 weeks to pay his losses every time he works there. But they're all...
That's pretty incongruous.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
As I say, it's a different study. It's a different study. Very few, but the strange part of it is the magician, who becomes very advanced in his art, with cards particularly, cards or dice, he gets into the higher flights, which are the gambler's sites, which are used to make a living. This is, they can be applied to magic beautifully, but
So,
this is a different study.
Would it be true then to say that the more rarefied the magician in his work, the closer he comes to the ultimate professional gambler?
Yes, the gambler's approach.
Yeah, the gambler's approach.
Yeah, on his...
Both psychologically and
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And that's really been...
Of course, they're divergent. I mean, there's a difference there, but still, this is his aim.
But I mean, excluding the...
Because the proof of it is, when a man has his money invested, and he's got a lot of money invested, and if he can be deceived under those conditions, whereas doing a trick, well, what's the difference if he catches you or not? It doesn't matter. But when a man's got money invested, you're under close scrutiny, and you've got to be able, it's got to be perfection almost.
Yeah. But it must take an unbelievable kind of makeup.
Oh yes, of course it does
to remain cool.
Oh, that's what everybody. I mean, even if I wanted to do it, I would never have the nerve or the heart to do it. I wouldn't have the audacity to do it. You know, I haven't.
Excuse me for interrupting, but in one of your writings, you mentioned I meant to ask you this earlier. You mentioned, and it stuck in my mind, that when you were a young fellow, that one of the most difficult things for you to achieve was unflinching audacity.
Well, no, I know what I mentioned, because years ago when I learned to do the cards up the sleeve, because I knew many ways of doing it, but I read in Erdnase, it says sleights required, masterly feats of palming, and unflinching audacity.
Yes.
And as a kid, I thought, well, boy, I can get those masterly feats of palming, but this unflinching audacity, I don't think I can attain it.
Well,
because I remember reading about Alexander Herman, who went down with a big bouquet of roses to a lady and handed them to her for assisting him. And then somebody said, oh, but you didn't find the ladies, because he'd found 3 cards had risen from a roulette. And they said, but you didn't find the lady's card. He said, well, I gave the lady the roses. She said, well, you're not going to find my card. Madam, just pass your hand over the roses, and this card came up from the rose bush, see? But it was all based on a human hair. And it said that, I remember reading that the nerve that Herman did going down with these fashionable women, and the whole thing rested on this human hair, which was very fragile. If it had broken, nothing, the whole
so
thing
goes the trick.
You've got cards run up so they'll come to yourself on the deal. Those cards are wherever they are, that's the work, because there's been work done on it, and that's a picturesque word, but that's an old-fashioned word. Now they call it carrying a slug.
Carrying a slug.
Carrying a slug. Yeah, that's the latest term out in Gardena and places like that. They say, well, he carried a slug. It means that in among the cards, or certain cards arranged in a certain place.
In a call, though.
Yeah, so you have control of them, so that's called carrying a slug. I used to harp, you see, this Dr. Elliott.
But I think that's a fascinating...
Yeah, well, Dr. Elliott, you know, who was a Harvard graduate, he gave up a medical profession to follow magic. He challenged the world. Yeah, he challenged the world with a deck of cards one time. $5,000 challenge.
Was he an incredible performer?
Very good, yeah. To beat anybody in the world, to beat him with an unprepared deck of cards. Now, the conditions were they had to do 6 original things and 10 standard things, and he beat anybody in the world. Well, I became very friendly with him, and he liked me very much, and we became great friends. But he used to say to me, Vernon, isn't it funny? Magic, he says, the art of magic, it's so simple. 2 little words, be natural. Now, he meant not only be natural, but in everything, especially in sleights, you have to be natural. You can't do these funny things. This is not magic. This is, you know, be natural. Not only if you're playing a part, you have to be natural in the part. I mean, you can't be phony. You got to be natural. Magic teaches you to be more observant than the average person. Because I've never trained myself. Like Huda used to take his son around, you know, and they look in the window. You read that story in the magic books. And, you know, he'd just walk by a store, and then he'd ask his son how many objects he saw in the window. And by constant practice, his son, after a time, could walk by a store and describe almost every item in the window.
Well, then they had their little second sight.
Yeah, that's what they were developing.
Yeah, that's what they were developing.
Second sight. But as I say, magic teaches you to be, because I've noticed that so many times. I don't notice. I mean, I don't notice, for instance, the color of somebody's eyes or their hair, or whether they're wearing a girl, whether she's got earrings or red shoes or green. But I notice that I'm more observant, because I often, with other people, I can see, I notice a lot of things they don't notice at all. And I mean, I don't know, as I say,
An awareness to your surroundings, too.
And I can't analyze art. I don't know. I know something about perspective and foreshortening and things, and ordinary knowledge, common knowledge, but I know what I like, and I know what I feel. But some people, God, they seem to have they don't feel art. I mean, they see some garish-looking, horrible colored photograph, and they say, isn't that beautiful? Boy, if a guy could paint like that, wouldn't that be something? You know?
Is magic a matter of timing to you?
Well, I think a lot of facets to magic.
It certainly is, hopefully, poetic.
Well, I try to analyze a lot of these fellows. I know I've helped. I try to help everybody now. Mike Skinner is getting much. He took a stage show now. It's remarkable how much he's improved just by working. I mean, at first he looked like a scared, still looks a little like a scared rabbit. He walks up, when he's doing close-up magic, you don't notice that, but on the stage, he walks out on the stage, and to me, he looks like a frightened rabbit. I mean, he needs a different opening altogether. But it's hard to convey this to people. They don't see themselves as they are. But I think I always consider my greatest, if I had any great accomplishment in magic, Cardini was a kind of a shadow of, because I was the one that, when Cardini first came to New York, he was just a dopey Englishman that did a very bad act.
Would you tell the story, relate the story about when Cardini first met you, I guess. I think you were cutting silhouettes, weren't you? But I mean, that's a story that always amused me.
Well, that was very funny. Well, I had this silhouette store. It was Larry Gray, the fellow I told you was a great entertainer with cards. And we finally got we'd only go in certain hours of the day when there was a crowd on Broadway, and we'd make enough money we paid $300 a bunch for the store, and as long as we had the 300 in, and then once we got that 300 put aside for the month, then we just worked enough to defray expenses from day to day. We'd the hell with work. We'd talk magic. So anyway, I thought we got to have a little income coming in while we're not in the store, so we rented part of the store to Jack Davis, who was working for Bob Sherman. He had to put in a magic counter there, a little magic counter, very neat in the corner. But we had to go by the studio and to the back to the magic. And every now and again, Jack Davis would call me. He says he's an amateur magician here from Kokomo, Indiana, or from Houston, Texas. He wants to meet you. And I'd walk there, and there'd be some guy, will you give me an autograph, Mr. Vernon? And he didn't know anything about magic at all, you know. So after a time, I said, listen, Jack, don't call me back to meet these people. Don't tell them who I am or anything. I said, unless some fellow's very clever or shows some promise as a magician, I don't want to meet all these fellows. To hell with them, don't call me. So one time he came back and he says, hey, there's an Englishman out here. He said, there's an Englishman. He said he does very nice fans for the car. Well, that's reminds me.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You have to fan the card for the camera.
Anyway, I've got some cards here. I can get them out of my pocket. Well, anyway, he said, this Englishman, he was very blasé, very typical English. And he said, you're an artist? I said, well, I do magic too. He said, what do you do with the card? And I said, well, I do anything. He says, can you make it a fan? I said, certainly. He says, let me see you make a fan. So, I made a fan like it. And he said, how do you get it all the way around there like that? I said, I don't understand what you mean. He said, well, when I make a fan, he says, I have to do that. Then he says, I finish it with this hand. He says, you do it all with one hand, see, all the way around. I said, well, you just bring it all the way around. And he said, I don't understand that. He said, do you make a blank fan? And I said, yeah, sure, a blank fan. I said, here's a blank fan. I made the blank fan the other way. Of course, these are ornamental cards. I mean, they're printed on both sides. Everything he showed me, I was already acquainted with. We have 3 cups and 3 balls. One there, and one there. Any cup you choose. The center one, all right. You do like that. Whichever side. Which side? Over here? All right, look. Go on from there. It's over here. Now, of course, it wouldn't have made any difference. If you wanted it on this side, I'd do that, would come over to this side. Now, I'll show you how the ball will penetrate a cup. We'll put it on top there. We say down, goes right through. So we have 3 balls, 3 cups. Oh, just come. Oh, there it is, went right down there. Boom. 2 balls, 2 cups. I don't want you to think, there are only 2 there. 2 balls, 2 cups. Last one. Go. Roll 3. Now I'll show you once more. I'm going to show you how to cover them over. I'll do this in slow motion. Some people think it has to be done quickly. 1 under each cup. 1, 2, 3. Now, if I put this one back in my pocket, and I put this back in my pocket, it should be easy enough to follow that there's still one here. But this one has come back. Now the reason for that is this. I pretend to put it here. I keep it here. I pretend to put it in my pocket. I bring it with a little finger and put it behind the cup. See, it's not really there at all. But if I actually put it in my pocket, how many are there? Most people guess they're wrong because you see there's 3 there. 1, 2, 3. Now if I put all 3 away, if there's one under there, I must use a 4th one. I do use a 4th one. There's the 4th one, see? Then sometimes one of these come here, sometimes one comes here, and sometimes one like that. So that's the old Egyptian trick. Trick, you see, of course, has been handed generation after generation have done this trick, and every performer, this is like rendering the classic. It's a classic, and magic has its classics, just like music or painting and everything. And as I say, and you can't very well go wrong with the classics, but there are many ways to interpret the classics.
And of course, there are classics in reference to card technology too.
Oh, yes,
there?
yes, certainly, yes.
A couple dozen basic moves.
Yeah,
probably,
they live. The real classic persists. The others come and go. Fads come and go, but the classics stay.
In breaking down basic card moves, Dai, what would you put it into a dozen basic moves, or how would you frame that?
Well, they say I've known performers who only knew I might say 5 basic sleights. We call sleights means maneuvers that are secret maneuvers, and with 5 secret maneuvers like a change and a shift and different maneuvers that are used in magic. With 5, you can do a very creditable performance. You know, you don't need too many. It's a great mistake to get cluttered up with too many. That's my trouble. I like everything, and I keep. But you should stick to you should master the basics to get them down. Just like certain things in painting or sculpture, they have to fundamentals have to be right. Then after that, you can explore, do different things. You know, people often say, how do you do these tricks? How do you do card tricks? Well, very few people, magicians aren't honest people. I'm going to be perfectly honest and show you how the sleeve is used to do tricks. For that purpose, I'm going to use 10 cards, which I have already counted off. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's 7, 8, 9, and 1 make 10. Now with these 10 cards, I'm going to hold them at arm's length, have them go up my sleeve, across my body, under my jacket, down into this pocket. I assure you I don't wear any trick clothing of any kind. That's a long way for the cards to go, and if you want to see them go, you'll have to watch very closely. I'll hold them in full view where you can see everything. I was a little clumsy there. I dropped those to show there are no strings on them or anything. I went out of sight. Go. You hear that click? That sends the card up the sleeve into the pocket. Now watch the second card go. It's funny, sometimes hot weather they stick at the elbow. Card number 2. Now when I dropped those cards, perhaps you thought I had a motive and I hid certain cards down there. But I assure you there are no cards on the floor. 2 have passed. I should have 8 left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now watch the 8 cards, see if you can't see how they go up the sleeve. Now watch this very closely. I just do this, see, like that. You say that's a pretty clumsy move, but you can't tell. I just want to see if you're watching that time. I passed it down to this pocket, you see? So that leaves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards. Now I'm going to try a very difficult maneuver to pass 2 at once. 1, 2. 2 clicks like that. 2 cards. I had 6 a moment ago, I now have only 4. Now to prove that these 4 actually go up the sleeve, I've got to try and stop one at my armhole this time as it goes across. Watch. Shake like that and reach in there and get it. That leaves just the 3 cards in the hand. Now when you come down to the last 3, you keep them perfectly squared up. That's the whole secret of the trick, to keep the cards perfectly squared up like that. Little shake, reach in here, you get a card. Another shake, another card. Leaves a single card in the hand. Now if you were to walk behind, and you'd see what happens. The card starts to travel along that way. Now if you push it too hard, it slips out of sight, see, where you can't see it up there like that. But if you put it in the hand like that, remember the card, the ace of clubs, you just lay it in the hand like that, and you wiggle your thumb like, you see the card runs right along, comes right out like that. That's the way it works.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You know, it's very seldom a magician does a trick twice, but I'm going to give you a chance to see how this trick is done. This is a trick with coins. Now these coins are from Australia. These are half crowns, worth about 50 cents. I have 8 of them. 8 coins. I want you to observe very closely what I do. There's my own signet ring, and 4 coins. And this hand, 4 coins. Now you got to remember, this hand has the 4 coins alone, and this has the 4 coins with the signet ring. Now the signet ring is in the right hand. Remember, in the right hand. Hold both hands apart like this. One hand goes under the table. You see all the coins go through. Now I know most people say, well, there was some cheating went on there somewhere. I'll do this again, because I want you to see that this is fair and above board. There's the ring. And I take 4 coins in that hand, 4 in it. Now everybody knows it's impossible to go bang and have them all come in this hand unless in some way, before I start the trick, I get coins from hand to hand. I want you to be sure that I do no such thing. There are only 4 coins there, nothing up my sleeve, nothing else, just the 4 coins. And in this other hand, I have nothing but the 4 coins in the ring, nothing else in the hand, nothing up the sleeve. Now the hands do not come together. I hold them wide apart like this. This hand goes under the table. You get it here, so this is a pretty thick table. Up, go. And they all... That's about all there is to it. There's a hole in the table, but you can't see it from where you're sitting.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You see the cards? All right. Now, see the ace of spades has the advertising mark on it, and bicycle and so on. The red cards don't have printing like that. Now, by a simple maneuver like this, turning the card like that, you see one of these aces, the ace of hearts, turns face up. Now by a faster move like that, that turns the ace of hearts down and the ace of clubs turns face up. Now the diamond, you have to turn very slowly. Then the diamond will turn over, you see. Now of course, the spade being a little heavier than the others, you can turn these cards as much as you like. Nothing will happen to the spade at all because the cards will stay face down. But if you just tap it in the center like that, you see that ace of spades turns over. Now, look, I'll put those aces on top of the pack like this, and I'll cut the cards. Now you imagine you're playing in a card game, these cards are shuffled and cut. And if you want to, you can give them a triple cut like this. Now I'll do this again, watch, I'll shuffle the cards like this. Cut. The aces always stay on the top. Now I'll show you. You take these cards this way, 4 aces, put them back on the top again. Now this time, I'm going to take the cards, half of them face up and half of them face down. You'll shuffle them in like this. So half of them are shuffled in, face up, and half face down. Like this. You see the way they are? Half are shuffled up, half down. I'll do this very slowly. Watch this as close as you can. Some of them are face up, some of them are face down. They're all mixed up. But with one maneuver like this, well, wait a minute. Be sure to see back to back, face to face. One slap. They all straighten up, with the exception of the 4 aces, which are 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all there is to that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
take my word, there's only one ace of spades in this pack, the ace of spades. Now if I take this ace of spades like this and put it under the top card, you can see it under the top card there, but it's not, it's on top. Now look, I'll do that again. There's the ace of spades, see? Only one card, only the ace of spades. Now I'm going to put it under the top card. And you see there are no double lifts or any of that so-called trick. It still comes to top. Now I'll do that again. Put the ace of spades underneath the top card. There's the ace of spades underneath there. I just do that and I say come up and the ace of spades comes right to the top again. A lot of people don't believe that a card can come up that way. Now look, I'll put it in face up in the pack. There it is. Now watch the side. The camera can watch from the side. See if you see that ace jump up. Look, watch. 1, 2, 3. See? I did that slowly. Now I'll do it fast. Watch. 1, 2. Oh, that was slow. I got to speed up. 1, 2, 3. See, it jumps right to the top. Now that can be, when the card is face down, it's impossible to see the action. Watch. The action cannot be seen. That's called the quickness of the hand deceives the eye.